Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at recruiting and consulting firm Riderflex. If you think today's tip or guest interview can help someone you know, please share this with them. And if you enjoy listening to our show, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button on the episodes. Finally, aside from our podcast, our day job here at Riderflex is to provide recruiting, staffing, and consulting services. You can visit riderflex.com to learn more about us and get the information on the services we provide. And now, a quick word from our sponsor and friends at Marketing 360.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Brady Harris on the Riderflex podcast. How you doing, Brady?
Steve, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Nice to meet you, man. I like your profile, like your story. I always love it when people just move up and kick ass in their career, and then they eventually make C-level. And then once they do make C-level, they're like, "Oh shit, I'm a C-level executive. What do I do now?"
Well, don't get too impressed. I made most of those titles up along the way. Half of them. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate the compliment.
Great to be connected. I want to get into Dwolla and all of that, but before we do, let's talk about Brady Harris, the person. Can you give us some family? You know, where you grew up, mom, dad, siblings, stuff like that.
I would love to. So I'm a Salt Lake City, Utah boy. So typical big Mormon family. Grew up with 8 siblings there in Salt Lake, and finished high school. I left the country for a couple of years to St. Petersburg, Russia, right after high school.
Wow.
And then, came back and jumped right into payments. Married my high school sweetheart at the time. And that would have been 2000, 2001. And we moved up to the Pacific Northwest, kind of the Portland area, and then Seattle. And we've been crisscrossing the country since then. So we've got 4 kids, and we've lived everywhere: Seattle and Portland, Utah, Atlanta, Georgia, and then we relocated out to Des Moines, Iowa, where Dwolla's headquartered about a year ago. So I had a great 20-year run or so here.
Why the Russia connection? I mean, was your family Russian? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, no. So if you know Utah, it's got a pretty big LDS or Mormon population. You've seen the guys with the black name tags, white shirts. Yeah. So that's where I did my 2-year church mission. You know, you get assigned, you don't get to choose your area.
Oh, really?
So,
I didn't know.
Yeah.
That.
So it was awesome. You know, you're graduating high school, and instead of going and making bad decisions at a fraternity somewhere, you're in some third world country for a few years. So it was a great experience and opportunity. And I got assigned to Russia. So I was able to go spend a few years in St. Petersburg.
At first, we were like, no, Russia. No, I don't no.
Well, it wasn't my first choice. It wasn't my last. But, you know, when I opened that letter, I was like, as long as it doesn't say something like Boise, Idaho, I don't want to offend anyone from Boise, Idaho. It's a great city, so obviously. But, you know, Boise, Idaho, or a Reno, Nevada. So, yeah, it was a little bit of a shock going to Russia. But what an amazing experience. I still reflect on it to this day. Just really, really cool opportunity.
Is that why you came back and decided to get a bachelor's in Russian from the University of Utah?
You did your homework. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, you're fairly fluent by the time you come home. And I actually, for a handful of years, I went into the Army while I was finishing college up. And
really?
And so I did interrogations in the Army, and you have to have a second language as an interrogator. So I used Russian, and then, I was able to do an undergrad there at the University of Utah, and then go on to do graduate school and stuff. So you kind of got Russia, you got the bachelor's degree, you have the military piece, and they all came together. So
now, interrogations, you weren't like waterboarding guys and stuff, were you?
Well, I can't say publicly. You know, it's funny. So I was in MI, military intelligence, during a lot of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars.
Really?
And so what most people don't know about interrogation is really interesting. Is it's very relationship based. You know, you don't get a lot of actionable intelligence by kind of the Hollywood version of interrogating someone. It's through building relationships, with the detainee. It's with, establishing trust. It's all these kind of, maybe softer methods that's meant to build like real relationships with someone. And hopefully, out of that, you're able to get the information that you need. But it's very psychological. It's very relationship based, super fascinating science that goes into it.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Plus you had all the Russia stories too. Now you said you had a high school sweetheart. So let me back up for a minute. So you got this high school sweetheart. What, you dated her like when you were junior, senior, all that?
That's right. Yep.
Okay,
Junior and senior. Yep.
All right. And then you open the letter and you're like, I got to go to Russia. I guess I'll see you in 2 years. And what, and you maintained the relationship long distance? She didn't start dating somebody else in college?
Yeah, that's a really smart question. I thought we maintained it. She was off dating all kinds of people and having a fun college experience. And so, yeah, you've got this. I come marching back from Russia thinking everything was the same. And she was like, well, let me tell you about the last 2 years on my end. So, but it worked out. Yeah, we were meant for each other and dated for about 6 or 9 months. And yeah, I got married and been going strong since.
That's pretty good. Now, let me ask about your mom, dad. What'd your folks do? Well, your mom had 8 kids, so I know what she did.
Yeah, my mom, she was a champion. My dad was actually a major in the Army, so we moved around, the Army thing growing up until we settled back in Utah. And my mom was a stay at home, and yeah, I'm the oldest of I'm the second oldest of 8. Fun fact, so I have 6 brothers, and all of us went and served, church missions around the world, and then everyone went into either the Army or Marines. So we all kind of followed each other there. And now everyone's off on Wall Street and doing all kinds of really cool stuff. So
well, your parents must be super proud. I mean, nobody went to jail. Nobody. There was no rebel in there. You didn't have like one rebel.
No, I mean, it's pretty tame. I mean, they're proud, but they're tired. So they, you raise 8 kids, like you're done towards the end. But everyone turned out really well. So we were lucky.
Congrats to them. If they're both still alive.
Yep. They're in Salt Lake.
If they're listening to this episode someday, by the way, we're recording this on January 6th, 2022. If they're listening, congrats. I mean, 8 children all turned out to be successful and nobody got in trouble. I mean, hey, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I'll pass that along. That's nice. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. So you're doing this, you majored in Russian, you're back here, you talked your girlfriend into, coming back to you, and you're doing these interrogations and stuff. Did you know what you wanted to do for a living? Like, what were you thinking at the time?
No, as I'm sure your audience has heard, I mean, rarely is your career and your life a straight line. It makes sense in retrospect. You can look in your rearview mirror and say, okay, I see how these like series of events led, one to another, and it makes sense sequentially. I really didn't. Right after we got married, it's my early 20s. I paused on school for a bit, and my wife, she's super adventurous. She said, let's move up to Portland, Oregon, get into at the time what we called the payments industry.
Why?
And just
why that? Why did she want to do that?
Yeah, she we wanted an adventure. So newlyweds, get out of our hometown, and we had visited Portland and she loved it. There was a great job opportunity, in sales. And so she said, why not? We literally packed up the Honda Civic. It's not an exaggeration to say we had maybe $500 to our name at the time. And she said, what do we have to lose? Let's go have an adventure and let's go somewhere new. And that job that I took was ultimately the gateway that led to a really nice 15-year prosperous career with that company. And that kind of set off a series of events, professionally speaking. So we got really lucky there.
Okay. So what was it? What was that? Elliott Management Group? Is that what that was?
Right.
Yeah. Elliott Management Group. So that's what you moved up there. Now I got to tell you, culturally, from Utah to Portland, wow. I mean, holy cow. You went from like conservative to anything goes.
Yeah. Portland back, there was, Portland was eclectic for sure, but I think it's got increasingly, they always say keep Portland weird is kind of their tagline. They've lived up to it for sure, but it's gotten weirder. It was kind of weird when we were there, but
it's
really cool experience, cool city. Yeah, for sure.
great run. Tell us about Elliott Management Group. So you started out there, wow, back in 2001 as an account executive.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, fancy word for sales, commission only
You're
salesperson.
right. Right.
Making 100 cold calls a day and knocking
Mm.
doors on the weekend. And yeah, it was a really gritty role. I was young and motivated, had a new wife and a family that depended on me. But it was incredible, just developed a real appreciation for work ethic and got to learn how to socialize with people. And I always give the advice that if you have an opportunity, regardless of your field, to start in sales, it's a great way to develop some of those skill sets, those soft skills that you'll carry into whatever you do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it was I think at the time I was first maybe 20 employees, smaller company, and we just, we really hit the right industry. The company started growing really quickly. And I think through a series of a decade and a half, I had probably 7 or 8 promotions, and then ultimately ended up as, president and CEO of that company. We were, nationwide at that point. We had 30 plus branch offices and 100 million revenue. So it was just that amazing, like once in a lifetime opportunity, that right business, right time, had a decent work ethic and was able to go along for the ride and just have a really cool experience seeing a company go from pretty much startup to 100 million. So it was great.
Yeah, startup to 100 million, 350 plus employees, several promotions all the way up to CEO. Was it family owned? Was it owned by PE firm? What was the history there?
Yeah, so the original founders were, it's funny, 3 frat buddies from the University of Utah. So it was headquartered out of Utah.
Okay.
And guys in their mid 20s, late 20s, and they just hustled, and man, they did an amazing job and brought in a lot of really good people. We eventually did a couple private equity transactions there. So as I became an executive, we had 2 PE sponsored transactions, so successful exits.
2 different times. Two
different
times.
times.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. So that was an incredible opportunity. We were ultimately acquired, and we functioned as a wholly owned subsidiary. So that was a really good opportunity for me as an executive, that I saw that not just the scaling of a business, coming from kind of that entrepreneurial phase to, really scaling out a business and what you need to do to, standardize your processes. But then going through those private equity transactions, getting acquired, just world-class education for sure.
Yeah, you beat me to it. I was just about to say the same thing. I mean, what a wonderful experience. First of all, you start out in startup with a little kind of some friends. I was going to say family owned, but a couple of buddies owned it, which is unique, in and of itself, right? Just that environment. And then to go through 2 different transactions with 2 different PE firms while getting promoted. And oh, by the way, surviving the PEO transactions and not getting,
right,
kicked out or whatever, which happens so often. And then and then both of those PE firms, going through both of those and them trusting you and you building those relationships for them to say, okay, this Brady guy. Who's this Brady guy? Yeah, he's pretty good. Let's promote him some more.
Yeah.
I mean, that is not a small thing. I just want to pause right there for the listeners, because if anybody's listening to this episode and you don't understand how PE works, I mean, so often there are changes, not all the time, but PE comes in, they bring their own people in or whatever. I mean, I don't see a lot of situations like Elliott Management Group that have gone through changes like that ended up bringing somebody like you along that was there from the beginning and keeping them as the CEO. Like I do not see that very often. So congratulations.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. No, you nailed it. In fact, the original founders, I think they made it through the first transaction.
Right.
they ultimately offboarded.
Yeah.
And so, as they offboarded, I was, next in command and was given the opportunity to, step in to run the business. That's when we went through a subsequent PE transaction. But yeah, to your point, if you can navigate a successful, private equity sponsorship and have a good exit, that's just a credential in terms of your professional pedigree you can lean on for the rest of your life. You learn a lot through that experience, just in terms of how to professionalize a business, how to manage financials, how to, work with a group of investors that, have a defined playbook. They're looking for certain returns on the investment. Just, world-class education.
Totally agree. Now, when you got promoted to CEO, that was a moment, right? Did you call your wife? You're like, hey, we're going to dinner tonight. I just got promoted. That was a major moment for you, right?
It was, yeah. It was that rare. I don't want to say rags to riches, but we reflect on how we started at that business, that $500 in our bank account, Honda Civic, and living in less than favorable conditions, in an apartment there in downtown Portland. And ultimately, when I was able to get that president CEO role, I think it was just gratitude. I felt, if I'm being honest, you feel inadequate. You feel
Yes.
there's a lot of imposter syndrome you've got to fight. And so you have to fight those voices in your head and kind of reflect on what you've accomplished. And you may not be qualified, but hopefully you're capable, of doing the job. But we knew even at the time that was a world-class opportunity, and it forever changed our life. So it has really been the foundation for everything I've done since then.
How was the board at that time? Was it strong enough where there were some good mentors and advisors on there, or did you have some other people you were leaning on? Like who? Because I've been a CEO and a president of a couple of $40 million companies myself, not to mention our recruiting firm Riderflex. And so I know personally that being a CEO can be a lonely, scary place. Who did you lean on early on there? Who was your go-to? I don't know if you want to mention names, but
yeah, there's been a handful of influential people. In fact, it's funny. I did a LinkedIn post yesterday morning, and I was just, reflecting on, my journey over the last 20 years, and a handful of people that, I think were really influential, both from a mentorship standpoint and just extending opportunities to me. I'd like to think that, the opportunities I was given, again, I was never qualified for them. I didn't have the credentials to take on that next role, but yeah, those people that give you opportunities, they believe in you, they lift you up when you fall down. I mean, they've just, for myself, have been really pivotal, throughout my career. And there were some, both at a board level and also behind the scenes that there was a lot of rough edges. As a first-time executive, I was kicked out, more than one board meeting. I was asked to excuse myself. So, you work through that and you smooth out the rough edges and you figure it out. But definitely bumps along the way.
When you're out in the hallway of the hotel or wherever the board meeting is, and they're all sitting in that conference room, you're out there going, I wonder if they're trying to decide right now whether or not to fire me.
No, exactly. I heard more than once, like, Brady, maybe it's a good time for you to step outside for a few minutes. So
so good.
You only live once. You got to go strong.
That is so good. You know what? For me, the board meetings, I'm sure it does the same thing for you, right? Like, just first of all, getting ready for them takes several days. You get the board book ready, you got all the numbers ready, you're trying to study the numbers, and you're trying to prepare all the questions that certain board members are going to ask. And then you got that one board member who's kind of an asshole, and you're like, okay, let me call Fred. I'm going to call what I used to do, Brady. I knew who was going to be the toughest, right? Usually, like there was always like one or two board members that are always just going to push your buttons a little. So I would send them the board book before everybody else, and then I would set a one-on-one phone call with that person before the board meeting.
Smart, super smart.
And I'd be like, hey, you can just go ahead and beat the shit out of me now, and then that way when we get to the meeting, it's all good.
Oh, that's so brilliant. I'm going to borrow that. That really is. Yeah, that's really a smart tactic. One thing I've learned with boards, I know you have a lot of CEOs and budding entrepreneurs that will interact with boards one day, is it really is a relationship that you have to manage as an executive.
Yep.
And I've learned from the very beginning that, you have a small window of time as a first-time executive where you can establish the rules of engagement with your board.
That is so true.
That window's open where it's how involved do you want them to be, and to what degree do you want to communicate on the inner workings of the business. And so you have to be very thoughtful around, I'm setting up this relationship and those rules of engagement, and I need to do it right, because it's really hard to change that once the mold kind of sets, right?
Oh, that is good advice right there, Brady. That's good stuff. Yeah, you're totally right. once they get into a rhythm, trying to change them later. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
It is a big part of the job. If or if there's a PE firm, especially if you got an aggressive PE firm that has more than 51% of control of the cap table, and they're calling every day saying, "Hey, why did you buy an extra case of toilet paper last week or whatever?"
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I know you've been in that world. The fact you use that example. I remember one year we were trending off of EBITDA, off of our revenue targets for the year. It was summertime, and one of the board members who represented the PE firm called and said, "Hey, we need to get really draconian with costs, to get this EBITDA target dialed back in." And it wasn't a big miss.
Yeah.
And so we were asked to do things like go to one-sided printing on business cards, canceling, coffee service, not sending employee plaques monthly, doing it quarterly. I mean, those, make no mistake, P's will do what's necessary to hit those financial targets. It's no game.
It's true. Totally true.
Yeah.
You've lived it. Oh my gosh. We could do a whole other episode on it.
Yeah.
Okay. So great career there though. Really, congratulations. You're there almost 17 years, right? I mean, 16 and a half years. What, did you get recruited? Did you get a phone call? Talk to me about how you left there. Go ahead. And then you went to work for Payscape, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So Glassdoor does this like highest rated CEOs thing every year. Yeah. And I want to say it was in 2017. This is not like a humble brag, but it fits into it. So that year, I think I was nominated for third or fourth highest rated CEO.
Oh, cool.
In the country. So it's a pretty visible accolade. I appreciate it.
Nice.
It's
nice.
So it's pretty visible. It really gets your name out there. They do a good job promoting it. And so when that happened, when I received that recognition, it really opened the floodgates, where combined with my private equity background and successful transactions, it opened up a lot of people who said, "Hey, we're looking for a CEO who's not a boardroom CEO. He or she's willing to roll up their sleeves and be in the fight and scale out a business and all the things that, so many companies are looking for." Mm-hmm. And then you have that credential of the Glassdoor. And so, at that time, I'm coming up on a decade and a half, and, really felt like, not to sound cliche, but, we had to get out of our comfort zone and try something new and go to, a new business. Mm. And so, this really cool company out of Atlanta, Payscape, it was founder led, still co-CEOs. They were EBITDA positive, growing nicely in the FinTech space. And we got to know each other. They said, "Hey, listen, like, we have kind of hit our ceiling in terms of how to grow the business." They were entrepreneurs through and through. Okay. And the business was just kind of at that inflection point that they needed to bring in maybe some, professional leadership. Mm-hmm. So spent a lot of time with them, getting to know each other, a lot of hikes up in the mountains of Utah. And we ultimately said, "Listen, let's do this. I'll relocate my family with 4 kids in tow to Atlanta. I'll take over the day-to-day for Payscape with a goal to do some kind of transaction, whether it was an IPO or a PE back deal." Okay. And that's how that happened. So yeah, we went out to Atlanta. They, gave me a lot of jurisdiction over the business, and I was there about 2.5, 3 years with that company.
Equity.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. So you're exactly right. That was that's kind of the idea that, at that stage of your career, things like salary they're important. Mm-hmm. You need to buy groceries and, pay for your home and go on a vacation once a year. But you increasingly look for, a seat at the proverbial table. So they were really generous with equity. We knew we were be doing a transaction. They were asking me to be really hands-on with the business. And so, yeah, we went out and we had a successful transaction about 2.5 years after getting there. So that's great.
That's a quick turnaround. Congratulations. That's moving pretty fast. I mean, heck, it takes 6 months almost sometimes to get through the due diligence and the transaction piece. So you started that was pretty quick. Nice.
Yeah, we had a great team. They had all the pieces in place. It's, again, you're just kind of bringing the playbook of what you've learned from scaling a business you know around the corner, you know what the mistakes are, and you've been to that show before. So a lot of it was just bringing that experience. Had really good support from those, co-founders. The FinTech space is really hot. It was hot then, and so we just kind of captured all those tailwinds, and we're able to take the business to market and found a great private equity to partner with. So it was a good run.
Congratulations. My first question is, how come you didn't take some time off? I mean, you went right to work for Dwolla. Why didn't you take 6 months off and just chill?
Yeah, that's yeah. There's some issues that I need to work out. I don't know what because to your point, I did that with Elliott Management and Payscape. I think I had maybe 1 week break between the two, after 15 or 16 years. Yeah, same thing. When we did the Payscape transaction with Parthenon Capital there out of Boston, we immediately went on an M&A binge. So within 6 months, we, as the parent company, now under private equity sponsorship, we went and acquired 4 companies with 30 million plus EBITDA between those 4 companies.
Oh, so, and Dwolla was one of them.
So Dwolla wasn't one of them. So Payscape is the parent company. I'm president of that company at the time. We go and we start acquiring a bunch of businesses, and we're doing integrations and bringing the teams together. We went from a few hundred employees to 1,000 employees, over 1,000 employees in the matter of 6 months. So yeah, at that time, my time had really run its course. I came in and helped, do a transaction with Payscape. I never really loved the large 1,000+ employee businesses. And so I went to the board at that time and I said, hey, listen, I've done my job. We're bringing on a lot of executives through these M&A deals that are all going to need operating roles. Let me keep my equity in the business. I'll roll it forward, and then I'll go, do it again. And that's when I was introduced to Dwolla. So Dwolla was totally separate. That was just the next venture post transaction.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Were you introduced to Dwolla by this time? You knew a bunch of people in the space, and you probably knew somebody, or did you get a call from a recruiter, or do you remember how that happened?
Well, this is a really good tip. So love to share this with the audience.
Yeah.
So I obviously had relationships with private equity. Private equity is generally, growth stage or later stage companies. And knowing I wanted to get closer, not to startup, but maybe scale up, right? You've got good product market fit. You've dialed in your operations, there's revenue traction. That's kind of the sweet spot that I really love. And so I didn't want to tap into my PE network. That, as a private equity, you've got portfolios of companies, and often once you're an established commodity with private equity, it's not hard to get plugged into new businesses, right? In these portfolios. And so I switched it up and I said, I'm going to talk to a bunch of venture capital. I'm going to go the VC route.
Okay.
So I literally started cold calling and cold emails VCs all around the country.
Really?
To introduce myself and my background, and said, this is what I've done. When you look at your portfolio, do you have any, holdings that could benefit from somebody like me? So I really networked through the VCs, all over the country. And I looked at, no exaggeration, maybe 15 or 20, businesses that needed, a career CEO who knew how to scale up a business. And ultimately I was introduced to Dwolla through one of Dwolla's venture capital, Foundry Group out of Boulder, who's a really
Foundry. Oh yeah. Well, I'm in Colorado. So yeah. Brad Feld. And all yeah.
Yep. So good friends with Brad Feld. Chris Moody is a partner there. He sits on Dwolla's board. So I literally reached out to Brad one day and said, this is what I do. And he's like, all right, I'll connect you with Chris Moody. And did the rounds with the board and traveled out to Des Moines, and it was a great fit. So they were getting ready to replace the, similar to Payscape, the founder CEO. They were going to bring in the next, wave of leadership. So just perfect timing.
Nice. That is that's so awesome for the listeners to hear. Here's an established executive that's kicked ass his whole career, several successful exits, could have tapped into his current network, could have called PE people, could have just went to work for another PE based portfolio company, but stretched yourself, challenged yourself, started making phone calls to VCs who you didn't even know. Cold calls, even cold calls. That's pretty good. I love that, Brady. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
For all these people sitting around, oh, I can't find the career I want. I can't find the job I want. I'm not, nobody's offering me anything. It's like, okay, well, how many phone calls did you make today? Well, I put out one LinkedIn post. So I was like, okay.
No, you're so smart, and it's so true. My kids don't like that approach to life sometimes, but I remember my newlywed wife there in Portland. I had that commission only job, and I said, okay, hon, you got to go find a job. Like we can't survive on grocery store samples forever. And she was like, well, where do I even look? And I remember I brought her into the office. I handed her the yellow pages, and I was like, start calling people. Like, just start calling and asking, who's hiring.
Yes.
And it sounds outdated, but I really believe in that. Just, good old fashioned work ethic, that if you do the work and you make the relationships, it'll work. It works for you.
Couldn't agree more. And for the listeners, look, you don't, even though Brady was a 4.0 student, but you don't have to be like, you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. You don't have to have the highest IQ. If you have good people skills and great work ethic, and you have fairly good communication skills, well, you're going to do well if you'll just hustle.
You nailed it.
It really is just, I can't emphasize it enough. Like, if you'll just get your ass up every day and hustle, it's amazing what can happen. It
so
really
much opportunity. It really is. It's the land of opportunity. I see it every day. There's people of mediocre backgrounds. They didn't go to Ivy League schools. They come from humble beginnings, but they have grit and work ethic and tenacity, and they're humble, and they build those relationships, and you can be very, very successful. So I totally agree with you.
I'll take those people on my team every time.
Any day. Yep.
Give us the Dwolla overview. Give us the 3-minute pitch for everybody that's wondering, what the heck are they even talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. And by the way, it's Dwolla, DWOLLA.com, Dwolla.com. Give us the overview, Brady. Go for it.
Yeah, Dwolla is awesome. So, as I was looking at these various tech companies, primarily in the payment and FinTech space, I had known, coming from 20 years in FinTech, I had heard the name Dwolla, but I couldn't really articulate what they did in the payment space. And so when I got to know them, what I learned is that they move money. So account to account money movement, primarily ACH, in mostly a B2B or B2C transaction. I just saw this world-class tech stack. And the CEO at the time, who is still on the board, good friend of mine, Ben Milne, he admittedly said, listen, I'm not a go-to-market guy. I've never scaled out revenue and sales teams. He was a product focused, engineer trained type CEO. And I looked at Dwolla and I said, okay, payments is blowing up. Account to account money movement is a really exciting payment rail that has a lot of upside and opportunity. And I saw just this diamond in the rough. So I came on board, I think, a week after COVID started. And it was, I use the analogy, like, I remember doing podcasts at the time, like, all right, you're stepping into this fairly sizable company. COVID just started. The business, went through a RIF, a reduction in force. A lot of our, performance and platform metrics were dropping overnight because of COVID. What was that like? And I said, it was like, it's like this battlefield commander jumping out with his troops and meeting them on the way down. Like you're jumping into battle and meeting the people you're going to be fighting with on the way down. So it was interesting. But Dwolla is amazing. So, we power these account to account money movement transactions. And the business has just grown, and it's scaled up so quickly. So to give you a couple numbers, when I came on board, I think the business was processing about 12 billion a year in payment volume. So all the clients that use the Dwolla API and platform move about 12 billion worth of money through our platform. Coming into this year, so I've been here about 18 months, we had grown that number to about 20 billion.
Nice.
We left last year at 35 billion.
I see.
So
okay.
In the matter of 12 months, we went from 20 to 35 billion. and we'll probably do closer to 60 billion at the end of this year.
Wow.
So Dwolla was just positioned really nicely with, the digitization of payments because of COVID and what that was forcing, companies to do. And it was just, not to sound cliche, another great business, right time, right opportunity, and a really motivated team, to kind of capitalize on the work they had done.
For layman's terms, I'll ask you a couple of questions from an ignorant perspective. When you payment to payment, so what does that mean? It's a software or it's an app I can use on my phone? Like if me, recruiting firm Riderflex, wants to send money to one of our vendors, I can use Dwolla to do that. Give me some more layman terms example.
Yeah, I'm so used to speaking to a payments audience.
That's okay.
So really think of it as like a Venmo for businesses. So, we will have a business come to us. Maybe they built an app or they've created a software. We've got, I wish I could say names, but we literally have, Fortune 500s all the way to tech startups. And they'll say,
okay,
I've created a software, and within that software, we want to have some kind of payment capability. So maybe within that software, they want to embed a payment engine where they can bill their customers or they can bill their clients. So what they'll do is they'll take Dwolla's API, they'll build out a payment gateway or a dashboard or whatever, right, UX that can initiate a payment. And then we're the ones that are sending and receiving those funds between the different banks on the back end. So we can withdraw.
I see.
That's right. So that's the money movement piece. So do
you make your money from do you make your money from the use of the API and the software, or on the transaction of the money movement from place to place, or both?
That's smart. Yeah, it's both. So we have a somewhat unique pricing model. So similar to the SaaS world where you have a subscription fee, we have a recurring subscription fee, and then more payments. Historically in payments, you'll pay on a per transaction basis, either a percentage of the transaction. So if you run a Visa and MasterCard, you'll pay 2, 3, 4% of that transaction to the processor and to Visa and MasterCard. In our space, the great thing about account to account payments, primarily ACH, is you pay pennies for a transaction where you'll pay 2 or 3% using a card. So that's really our competitive advantage. Is we'll charge on a per transaction basis, but it is 90, 85% cheaper than running a similar transaction over a Visa and MasterCard network. So it's really an alternative payment rail to taking a credit card.
So right now, some of our clients, they pay us through ACH. Yep. Are they using a platform like yours to do that?
Most of the time they'll be using their bank. So, legacy banks, they will, you can initiate an ACH payment directly from your checking or savings or, your commercial line. Okay. So if it's low volume, I'm going to send 1 or 2 transactions a month, a bank is more than sufficient. Our clients are people like Rally or Goat or, really large insurance companies that I wish I could name, that they're sending, if not millions, minimally thousands of transactions a month. And not only do they need to send a high velocity of transactions, but they need ledger capabilities, and they need to be able to do accounting, and they need, fraud and risk loss mitigation tools. So that's the Dwolla platform, is we not just move the money, but then we've got all the functionality that sits around it.
I see. Okay, that makes sense to me, because when you first said about all the ACH stuff, I'm like, well, don't people just do that to the banks now? But now I get it. Okay, thanks for educating me on that. Okay, now I understand. If it's so much cheaper than using your corporate card to pay because Amex is charging you 3% or whatever, why isn't everybody doing that?
Well, there's a big movement underway. So I was actually on. I actually headlined on a panel for Credit Suisse earlier today with 1,000+ institutional investors and corporate clients in attendance, and it was exactly on this topic. Visa and MasterCard have had these monopolies both from a consumer standpoint. So I go in and pay, for my meal at a restaurant,
Mhm.
but also in a B2B environment as businesses need to
Yes.
transact with
Yes.
each other.
Yeah.
And they've gotten really greedy, right? You're paying 2, 3, 4%, and that can be really expensive for a business. Especially those lower margin businesses like restaurants to pay those fees. And so what's starting to happen is we saw this with Amazon in the UK. Amazon said, we're not going to accept Visa anymore in the UK. So they're starting to crowd out Visa and MasterCard as a payment option.
Wow.
In order to introduce things like direct account to account transfers, like what Dwolla does. So
whoa, that's a big move right there for Visa and MasterCard. They're like, oh shoot.
It's big. And if you have a Costco membership, you go to Costco and they only take certain types of credit cards because they have negotiated with Visa for basically a direct buy rate, and they've said we don't take any other cards because of the high fees associated with those cards. So yeah, it's interesting. Our client growth has increased upwards of 100% year over year. So when you look at our gross payment volume, jumping 15 billion in a year, our client growth, it's not because we're awesome. I'd like to think we're awesome, but it's more so because of, I think, this big push to get away from the card networks towards account to account money movement. It's more cost effective. It can happen faster. It's just a lot of tailwinds behind that space.
Wow. I really appreciate you educating me on this. And I know there's going to be some other small business owners and buddies that I know that are going to be like, what? Okay, hold on. I didn't know this, because what I'm hearing you say, and I'm going to get some of the verbiage wrong, is banks aren't really set up to do, you and your bank can't really do thousands of ACH stuff really easily, and it's not really set up for that. And then you're also pushing out Visa and MasterCard and Amex to a certain degree, and you're this other option that is faster, cheaper, safer, easier to use.
That's right.
All the above. Okay, pretty good.
Yeah,
all right.
No, you nailed it. Yeah, it's kind of a complicated space, but I'm sure you and your listeners have obviously heard of like Stripe, for example. Stripe is what was their most recent valuation? 70 billion or something like that. But Stripe is really similar to us, that they do card issuing, so they can set up Visa and MasterCard for businesses. They have an ACH product, but again, where Dwolla really shines is a lot of our clients have these fairly sophisticated fund flows requirements where they say we need to pay this business, and then we have to pay consumers, and then we need to route transactions through various banks. And that's where, again, using our API and kind of our financial institution ecosystem that we've set up, we can usually create pretty easy solutions that these large corporate clients are asking for. So really cool product, really cool space. Yeah.
Is your goal to take them public, or is your goal to take them to a transaction?
Well, so we're venture backed right now. We just did our Series B. We closed on our Series B round that was oversubscribed summer of last year. So that's a good question. The business is growing really quickly right now. I would envision that our next step will either be a private equity transaction, so some kind of private equity sponsorship. IPO is always on the table. We've looked at M&A.
If you IPO, I want you to call me and be like, "Hey, listen, man, we're IPOing next week. Don't miss out on it, because I want to get in on that. I
will. Yeah, so they're all on the table. I think that we'll probably start to look at it maybe early 2023. We have a really nice growth year set up for 2022. So we'll kind of pause and see what we want to do next, maybe 12 months from now.
Wow, I've learned a lot. You taught me a lot. I appreciate you bringing that down to 1,000 feet for us beginners here to learn about it. Thank you. And that'll help some of our audience too. Awesome. Congratulations on the growth and everything.
Thank you.
And it is Dwolla.com, DWOLLA.com. By the way, if you want to look up Brady Harris, he loves to get LinkedIn connections, and then you can hit him with a bunch of sales messages, because he really loves those.
Yeah, hit me up.
He's on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You know what? Isn't it funny? And I want to ask you a few more questions here, because I know we're almost out of time. it's interesting on LinkedIn, right? I mean, hey, I sell too, right? Like I own a recruiting firm, so I use LinkedIn for networking and selling, but some of the cheesy sales messages, and people just can't even be creative anymore. You know, you're using these chat
Yeah.
bots and all this other stuff. It's like, come on, man. Like, can't you just every once in a while? And I get probably 25 a day of somebody trying to just whatever, sell me something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got one the other day. It was really good. I won't mention the guy's name, but super personal. It wasn't an auto type deal. You could just tell, right? You could just tell. This guy sends
Yeah.
me a nice little personal note. He mentions the Riderflex podcast in the note, and then he calls my cell phone. Now,
Oh, wow.
He got my number. I don't know how. Calls my cell phone, leaves me a very nice, very personal voicemail. And I'm thinking to myself, out of all of the bad sales stuff I get every day, it's amazing how limited it is for a really good salesperson to make a connection. They just don't do it very often.
Yeah.
Anyway, to my point of that story was
Yeah.
I called the guy back. I said, listen, I'm
Yeah.
calling you back primarily just to tell you good job. I'm not sure I'm going to buy whatever it is you're selling, but I just wanted to tell you, great job. And by the way, come work for me.
No, it's so true. Yeah, that's my experience as well. You see a lot of kind of spray and pray techniques out there.
Yes.
And I have a soft spot for sales. I mean, it was
Right.
my upbringing, and I know how hard that is and how big of a grind. So I definitely try to err on the side of being gracious, with those that are trying to earn a living in sales. But yeah, you're right. I'll occasionally get that message. It's well researched. They reference whether it's podcasts I've been in on, or articles that I've pushed out, or previous roles that I've been in. You just tell they've done their homework, and it's very thoughtful, and you're definitely giving yourself a chance to get a response.
That's right.
It takes
That's
more
right.
work, but I'm with you.
I want to ask you a couple of questions here as we wrap up. Almost done. Kind of what I call kind of outside the lines questions. Feel free to pass on any of them if you want to, but a couple of bigger topics that are facing CEOs these days that I know people like you are having to deal with. First one is this whole COVID, vaccinations, masks, rules, making employees do certain things. I don't know if you want to touch on it. I'm curious, what are you currently doing? What's your plan moving forward?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, it's I would say generally speaking, I've tried to take an approach to our business and our policies that have empowered individuals to make decisions for themselves.
Okay.
I believe that as adults, we can make responsible decisions, and we should empower people to make adult decisions. We're really lucky in this sense. We have a nice headquarters here in Des Moines, but when you look at our employees, we're about 50-50 in-state versus out-of-state. So we've been recruiting a lot of employees all over the country. I think we've hired 30 people in the last 2 months, give or take. So we don't have to grapple as much with mask policies and vaccination policies. We're able to skate by on some of the federal mandates that are in the courts right now. But generally speaking, we just ask people to be adults and to make adult decisions. If we're holding an in-person conference, we'll say, hey, if you're more comfortable in a mask, wear a mask. Here's the things that we're going to do to create a safe environment. Generally speaking, I've told the business that I don't want to get caught up in, corporate politics identity, where corporations feel the need to take positions, on all things political. And I say, we're going to stand for principles. We're not going to take positions. And that's served us well. You risk alienating your employees when you start taking these real definitive positions on some of the topics out there. So we've tried to stay focused on the task at hand, and not wade into that space as a business.
Great answer, Brady. And we're doing the same here at Riderflex. Several of, in fact, the majority of the CEOs I have on the podcast are answering that way. There are some that do think they should speak out and take sides on everything. I generally, we have the same rule. My team always says, okay, well, here's the next hot button. Aren't we going to speak out on this? And I always say, no, we're not, because
Yeah.
Riderflex needs all clients, and every hot topic that goes out there, it's usually 50-50 split. And I'm not going to piss off half the potential client base. So no, we're not commenting.
Well, that's so smart. And not just your client base, but, as a business, when you step forward and you say, hey, we're taking this position as a business, you're also suggesting implicitly that you're speaking for your employees as one homogenous group. And you're not.
And
right?
you're not. You're not.
So we're really cognizant of that like we don't want to take these positions that risk alienating, our certain employees that may not agree with that. So again, we speak to principles, not positions, and that's served us well, especially over the last, year or two, where corporations have felt compelled to step forward and sometimes take sides.
I want to take that one step further and just say to the CEOs that might be listening, don't make the mistake of listening to a few very outspoken, aggressive employees that might be banging on your door at the office saying, we need to take a side on this, and assume that that's how all the people at your company feel, because it probably isn't.
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. And, a common response I've had, well, I appreciate people that are, passionate about causes, is I say, listen, your employer is probably not the best vehicle or vessel to go, fight for these causes that you believe in. So, you want to go join a march, you want to go join a cause, like that's great. But, to ask your employer to do that on your behalf, I think is not the best use of one's employment.
Love it. Yeah. Good answer, Brady. Thank you. I agree with everything you just said. Last question here. Well, actually two more really fast. We got like 3 minutes. First one is, if you could call the young man coming out of Utah, I'm talking about college, 21 years old, and you could tell him anything right now, if you could go back in time and tell him anything based on what you've learned, what would you say?
Now, that's a really, that's a penetrating question. One thing that I wish I would have known then that I've learned through trial and error over the years is that, not to get too spiritual or philosophical, but I think that we feel most in alignment with ourselves when we're living our lives in a way that are aligned internally with our core values. And I always say to my kids, I said, listen, if you imagine yourself at your own funeral one day, and you're looking at people coming to the front and saying certain things about you, what do you want them to say? What would you want to hear, at your own funeral? And I think that's a really helpful exercise to really dig down into what's most important to you. So, the earlier Brady, I sometimes made decisions personally and professionally that were maybe focused on money or driven by ego or title or some of these things that I think wouldn't have passed that funeral exercise, right? It wasn't deep down a core value. So I would have been a little bit more intellectually and maybe emotionally honest with myself of like, what are those real long-term values that are really important to me? And then making life decisions that are based off of those, or at least in alignment with them. Because I think we find a lot of inner peace, right, when we know we're living our lives in harmony with those core values.
What is Brady's number one core value?
Man, it's another great question. I think for me, one thing I've tried to embody, and I hope people would say about me that I've worked with is, I acknowledge that I've been really fortunate professionally. I honestly, more so than I deserve. And I would love to hear at my funeral one day that, to the people around me that I worked with, to my friends, to my coworkers, that I looked for opportunities to bring them along, to help other people be successful, to be of service to them when they needed it, to lift them up when they fall down. And so I look for those opportunities, right? Whether it's somebody looking for a job or somebody was laid off or somebody's going through something personal, I try to be a resource, to those people that I care about. And I hope that would be reflected, ultimately in how I lived my life.
Brady Harris, thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast. Great stuff, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.